Mike, check 1 2. It's the Y2K collector, and it's safe to say that the retro hype is officially done. In 2025, we're 5 years removed from the height of nostalgia, and we're 5 years removed from the height of everything that caused and created that nostalgia. We're removed from the pandemic, we are removed from lockdowns, we are removed from everything that made us remember a time where we had a lot of fun playing these games. And between 2020 and 2022, you had a lot of resellers really capitalize on that nostalgia. You had a lot of gamers trying to relive those moments of their childhood. And now a lot of that has passed. And what's replaced the warm, tingly feeling, that feeling has been replaced now with a feeling of almost disdain for retro. I think a lot of people who were once really into it are walking away from it. They're turning away from retro video games because of what it's become, because of what the retro gaming market has become. And the conversation around retro is now more centered around the pricing of retro video games and the difficulty of acquiring retro games and the resellers, and that's really what the conversation has been about, more so than the games, which is why I've been getting on live and I've just been playing the games, right? I've been playing them because we spend a lot of time talking about them, but I really enjoy playing a lot of these games. I have a lot of memories with these games, and so playing them kind of helps to restore the joy for me. But overall, a lot of people are turning away from retro game collecting to be specific. And don't get me wrong, there's a lot of ways that you can play retro games. You don't have to collect them physically. You can emulate them. You can play a lot of the mini consoles that have some of these games on them, like this SNES Mini, the Sega Genesis Mini, a lot of those mini consoles. You have virtual consoles, right? So you've got the Switch Online service, which has pretty much all of the older Nintendo systems. I mean, the ones that matter to most people, like the NES, the Super NES, the Game Boy, Game Boy Advance, N64, and I believe now they've just added GameCube, right? I think you also have Sega Genesis in there. It would be sick if they added like Sega CD and Sega Saturn. I don't know if Nintendo has the rights to do that or how they would do something like that, but my point is that there are a number of options available to you to be able to play these retro games, and so you don't have to collect them physically. But there was a large community that was really excited about collecting these games physically, and now there's just this disdain, there's this distaste for it, and a lot of that has been created by resellers. So what does that mean for collectors such as myself? Because despite having all those other options to play retro games, as a person who actually plays as retro games, there is a difference. There is a physical difference between playing an emulated retro game, or even playing a game on a mini console versus playing it on the original hardware. There is a big difference. Anyone who will tell you that there is no difference, to me, that person doesn't really play the games. They're not playing the games for real. Or they might be playing it here and there, but they're not trying to actually beat these games. When you consider games like Lightning Force, Thunder Force 3, when you consider certain fighting games, or when you consider certain beat 'em up games that depend on precise inputs, that lag it creates a big difference. And I know because recently, the other night, I was streaming Lightning Force, and I got pretty far in Lightning Force, farther than I thought, and I hadn't played it in a while. And the last time I played Lightning Force, I played it on my Sega Genesis Mini 2, or the Sega Genesis 2 Mini, or whatever, however you call it. It's a Model 2. And I played Lightning Force, and I couldn't stay alive for the life of me because of that like half-second input lag. And for someone like me who plays fast-paced, high-octane games, there is that difference. That half second absolutely matters. Now, it may not matter if you're playing an RPG game, if you're playing a puzzle game, if you're playing more of those slow-paced games, it doesn't really matter. But for like action platformers, run and gun shooters like Contra Hard Corps and Like I said, a lot of the shoot 'em ups, it matters. And so original hardware matters a lot to me. I prefer it. There's a dude, I can't remember his name right now, but there's a guy on YouTube, and he's done a couple videos about how he's gotten rid of all of his retro hardware. But the one game that he has held on to physically was Super Metroid, and that's because there are things that there are things that he can do in Metroid that can only be done on original hardware. No matter how hard he tries, he cannot perform certain moves when playing an emulated version of Metroid. He can still beat Metroid, he can still finish the game, but he's not as precise. He can't execute certain moves because of that lag. And so because of that reason, he kept his original physical copy of Metroid. I think he has the Japanese version of Metroid. And he's a very strong believer in emulation, but even he had to admit that when it comes to certain games, the original hardware is the only way to go. And so, why am I saying all this? I'm saying all this because this is leaving collectors of original hardware in a very kind of unique spot, because now that a lot of people are shifting to emulation, and now that a lot of people are kind of going, away from it and maybe turning more towards modern game collecting, this opens up a floodgate for us. This means that there should be a lot more games available in the marketplace. And I do believe that that is going to be the case. However, those games are not going to, you're not going to find those games in the same places that you found them 3 or 4 years ago, because a lot of the retro games that were floating out there in the ether over the last 3, 4 years, they have been heavily, they have been heavily funneled into the hands of resellers, game store owners, collectors, so on and so forth. So really the top three places that you're going to find a lot of these games now. And the games that I'm talking about are primarily Gen 4 and 3. I still think there's a lot of Gen 5 games out there. I mean, that like Gen 5 is in that transition. Gen 5 being like PlayStation, N64, Sega Saturn to a degree. Like Gen 5, you can still find some Gen 5 out there. Gen 6 being like Xbox, PS2, GameCube, you're still able to find more of that. And of course, Gen 7 is everywhere. There's Xbox, and you're tripping over Xbox 360 and PS3 games everywhere you go. But it starts to dwindle and dwindle the further back you go. So I'm primarily talking about Gen 4, which is the Super Nintendo, Sega Genesis, Neo Geo, TurboGrafx, Jaguar, like that generation. All that stuff has been funneled for the most part into the hands of collectors, resellers, game store owners, so on and so forth. There's a very slim pickings when it comes to that, and Gen 5 is right behind it. And so I think for collectors, yes, there's going to be a lot more games available, but you won't be able to hunt them in the same places you could years ago. And obviously, that's going to depend on which part of the country you're in, right? If you're in an area where there's not that many collectors, and there's more yard sales and stuff, you can probably still find stuff. But if you're in a bigger city, you're pretty much going to have to go to your mom and pop shop, GameStop in a lot of cases, and probably like your Facebook Marketplace or something like that. And that's where collectors are going to have to go. But the good thing is that the simple process of supply and demand should take place, right? So the more supply there is from people walking away from these physical items, it hopefully will drive the prices down on some of these physical games. Hopefully it drives the prices down. I'm hoping, right? I'm hoping retro game prices go down. I'm not one of those people. Yes, do I have a large collection of retro games? Sure. Do I need them to go up to feel good? No, I don't need the prices of my games to go up to feel good. In fact, I'm hoping that more retro game prices go down, because my retro collection isn't even that large. I have one small cabinet of games with Sega Genesis, NES, and Super Nintendo games, but there's plenty of Super Nintendo games that I want to get. There's plenty of Genesis games that I want to get, but I don't want to pay hundreds of dollars to get them. I don't want to have to pay $400 to get a copy of Troubleshooter. I don't want to have to pay, $500 to get certain, Super Nintendo games. I don't want to have to pay $5,000 to get a copy of Hagane. I don't want to do that. So if the prices go down, then that's great for me, but we're going to have to see. I think the increase in supply and decrease in demand will hopefully turn the tide. And I know we've been saying this for years. We've been saying this for a year, but this is the first time in a long time that I'm seeing more of a collective thought process around people getting fed up with the prices of retro games and people just saying, I'm done. I'm going to emulate. I'm going to do something else, but I'm not collecting this physical stuff anymore. I could be wrong. I could just be speaking through, from a very narrow lens that I'm seeing the topic through, but you guys let me know what you think down in the comments below. Like I said, if prices go down, that's good news for us collectors. If people start to emulate more and care less about retro, that's great for me as a collector, because that means I can get even more games, more of the games that I want at cheaper prices. But let me know what you think, and I'll catch you in the next video. It's the Y2K Collector. Take it easy.